One of my favorite movies is Jurassic Park. I like watch it every month. All right, this is Norse Teaches Science Biology Edition videos. We're continuing into my evolution section. I am Mr. Norse, and today I present to you evidence of evolution. This is the evidence that scientists have out there. Some of the evidence, not all of it, just the major stuff that kind of prove evolution in their sense. So by the end of this video, I can summarize the evidence of evolution from fossil records to anatomical structures. So before we talk about that, we talked about natural selection in a previous video, but one thing I need to talk about is something called artificial selection. It's when people select specific traits that are favorable in scientific animal species or animals or species and find that organism with those traits and breed for those organisms. One example is with dogs. We domesticated wolves. Once we domesticated wolves, we then started breeding the wolves that we now call dogs into all the different species we had, like Dachshunds, colleagues, bulldogs, labs. We bred for the traits that we wanted in them. Just so you know, Dachshunds were um, were selected and bred to go into foxholes and get foxes out in burrows and stuff. We also did it with wild mustard into some of the food that people eat. I'm not going to say I eat all of this because I don't. I'm not a big vegetable person, and if you ever met me in person, you would know that I don't eat vegetables much. All right. So, summarizing the modern theory of evolution, remember there was competition among members of the population for food, survival, and breeding. You had natural selection, which is survival of the fittest, means the one that can reproduce the best is going to pass on their traits. There's descent with modification. So, as you go down successful generations, there's going to be different changes here and there. And time is needed. Time is very important in almost everything in science. Time is needed. So let's talk about some evidence of evolution. One, there's patterns in the fossil record that prove that evolution is working. Things are changing. You can kind of see what's going on in the fossil record and stuff in the GIF to the right. There's similar anatomy. We're going to talk about how things have different similar structures. Anatomy is about how the structures of the body and the bones. And there's biochemical similarities. And so that just means comparing proteins, basically DNA similarities between past organisms and now organisms. Like they're almost exactly the same. So we look at that. So we would look at the amino acids and we'll look at the nucleotides and see the sequence and everything like that. Now, all of these suggest that there was once a common ancestor for everything in evolution. So let's talk about the fossil record. Fossils. If you don't know what a fossil is, fossils are remains of once living organisms. They could be bones, they could be footprints, or they could be imprints. A lot of times, to prove evolution, we're going to need to have the bones so we can test the DNA. It also shows a history of life on Earth. What the records show is how species changed over time. We can see they're the same species, but now they have this, now they have that, now they have this. And like now, we think that dinosaurs had feathers, not leather skin. Um, we can also see when species went extinct. There's actually distinct times when major species went extinct. Um, Mass extinctions, but we can also see when this one little individual just stops showing up in the fossil record. And we can compare DNA to current species when we have the bones. We could compare the DNA of, say, a mammoth to the DNA of a elephant and see how close related they are. So, when with that, fossils also tell us age. Two ways we look at fossil age are absolute age and relative age. You can kind of think of the terms, and they kind of tell you what they are. But absolute age is determined by using the exact age of the organism. And we use a process called half-life dating or absolute dating. And we usually use carbon in the fossils. There's a half-life is the amount of time it takes for half of a substance to decay away. If you haven't taken chemistry or physical science yet, just so you know, elements exist in something called isotopes, and those isotopes change from one isotope to another isotope over a certain amount of time. And we actually know like some of the like carbon 14's exact half-life, and we know like uranium's exact half-life. So we can actually look at like stuff, those elements, and see and date them in like rock or in bone and see how long ago they lived approximately. Relative age is simply just tells whether something is older or younger than the organism you are comparing it to. So say you have this picture over here, and we find rock fossils right here. We know things below it are older, and we know things above it are younger. And then we can determine those ages by doing absolute dating. So when you look at rock layers, the older ones, the bottom layers are older, the top layers are younger because things layer on each other because of gravity. And then we can look at similar anatomies, and we're going to look at embryos, homogeneous structures, and vestigial structures. So how embryos say that there's a common ancestor is that they all look similar at certain ages. So you can see at the bottom what each organism is. But at the top, these are all the embryos in their earlier stages. If you look, they all, you can compare them, and they kind of all seem similar. They all look alike. It's only at certain stages that they start to look different. Like here, you start to see differences. Here, they kind of look similar. It's not until later stages that you kind of see this first one's a fish, the second one's a salamander, the last one's the humans, and look at the rabbit right next to it and the cat. Right? Embryos in their early stages look really similar. So it's kind of saying that we all had a common ancestor, that we, in the early stages, we all developed the same way. Homogeneous structures, what they are they are similar bones and structures, but they have different functions as organisms. So we can look at human, a cat, a whale, and a bat in their arm, paw, flipper, and wing. And here's some bones: the humerus, the radius, the ulna, the carpals, the metacarpals, and the phalanges. All four of them have those bones. They're all structured differently, but they all have the same bones. And that means we all have different functions in a little arm thing. Humans is for grasping, cats are for walking, whales are for swimming, and bats are for flying. But if you look, all of them have the humerus. They all have phalanges, but they all are shaped differently. But since they all have the same bones, it says that there once was a common ancestor between all four of them. Vestigial structures, they have no function in present day organisms, but they probably were useful in the past. So this is a whale. You have the backbone and you have the tail, but you have something called the pelvis and the femur, which are related to walking. But whales don't walk, they swim. But they still have the bones in there, because maybe in the past they once were on land and they went back to the ocean. There's a theory out there that some marine mammals once lived on land and then converted back into the water because it was easier for them to get food. Other in humans, we have like our appendix that we don't really use anymore. If your appendix gets inflamed, sometimes you have to take it out with the appendicitis. Or wisdom teeth, we don't use them anymore. Our mouths actually aren't big enough for them anymore, and that's why most people have to get them removed in their life. I know I had to get mine cut out when I was about 25, and I'm showing my age a little bit. And I only had 3 of them, but there's also people who don't have any wisdom teeth because my mom doesn't, and my sister had 1, but I had 3. but we don't use them, so we have to take them out, or they start messing with our jaw. They can cause pain. They can cause teeth grind into other teeth, and that was what mine were doing. They were digging into my back teeth and actually taking part of those off. So I actually had to get those teeth um, bone graft. But those are some of the basic evidence of evolution. There's much more out there that you can look at. A lot of stuff about evolution evidence, but I would just go to Google. But I really hope you learned something today. And this is Mr. Norris, and he is out for this video.